Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for your Commander-in-Chief to bring the RCMP into Abbotsford for the organized elite criminal ring. There is no if, buts, or maybe, Abbotsford. I took to the social media, to the world stage to protect my life, Abbotsford residents' lives, but above all, to show the elite ring in the Abbotsford Police, the organized crime. It's bloody obvious, and you know it's bloody obvious. But we owe, and we must say every day, a tremendous thanks to the Mission RCMP to show what the Abbotsford Police did to cover Henry Brown's attempted murder, Olenoff's threat to drop a lawsuit and video, but the election blocks and everything. You know that had to have smart and people that work with the law behind it. When I learned from Darren Braun, any information or any evidence going to the Abbotsford Police, they were squashing it. Can you imagine how many victims there is out there and that they squash to protect their friends? This is not just a small occurrence. These guys are masterminds at that. How you become a mastermind, you practice that repetition over and over and over and over and over again, and that's how you get good. They were really good at it. And thank God that it was Darren Braun, Henry's son, that opened his mouth. If it was anybody else, it would have been unbelievable. But under Darren Braun, it was believable. The Abbotsford upper management of the Abbotsford Police is a complete joke. We know it. They're fighting over who can own the company, how they can clean it, and that. You know what was supposed to be done. Abbotsford residents know what's supposed to be done. The RCMP knew what was supposed to be done. John Arastad knew. Pierre Poilievre and everybody knew. Where are the reports? Where are the Abbotsford Task Force and people sitting in your office with this, in your houses with the Safety Standards Act on the threats and everything? They were going to hold off paperwork to save the company. The Abbotsford Police, I believe, their men are being targeted on their streets. You saw the launch yesterday on the bullet wrap. It was a god-awful disgrace to all law enforcement that Abbotsford's manipulating police were doing the launch without other police forces coming in and speaking on it, or even the chief on it, or the cowardless mayor. So I want to give you advice. Vicky Hopes is going to be probably running a new story this weekend on Ross Siemens' jump in the parachute at the air show. I told you Ross was practicing to jump. They were setting him up, PR work. So they were setting him up at the little airport, and I knew because the city leaked the information. He said, Mr. Pelican, Ross is practicing at the airport, and he's going to pull over a big public PR stunt at the air show when it comes and jumps. But here's the thing. All councils and mayor are offered the opportunity to jump. Ross jumped tandem. You know what tandem is? Tandem. Somebody strapped to him. He jumped tandem. They shot the scene way back so it looks like he did it. Let me tell you about that. Jump. When it was offered to Councillor Mogill, Mogill denied it. But Mogill's wife took it and she jumped tandem. Doesn't it tell you? When a woman jumps tandem with a guy, she's scared. When Ross jumped tandem, it shows sissiness. And that's what it was about. But here's the bigger thing. He jumped trying to show Canadians that the allegiance to the Canadian flag was his parachute. Oh, take me out and hit me with a sledgehammer. How would Vicky Hopes even run an article when the man dumps his gas station, knocks homes off the mountain, stands by with an attempted murder with his boss, Henry Braun, lays at his gas station where elections are fought, has his co-partners in the Abbotsford First say, I grabbed Sandy Blue on the whipper-whapper, and now he's going to be a Canadian and a patriot. That's just bloody garbage. I hope Vicky Hopes doesn't even run that article. I wonder if Rick Rakes wrote that story for Ross Siemens. That bullet wrap was a disgrace to all law enforcement, and I'll call it out. It was a PR stunt. I heard from the city that's working hard with me behind Ross and Council's back and Dave Lowens' back after the attempted murder and everything I showed that I'm running for mayor. That the new police chief came from Victoria is working to get David Ebian to open and do a launch at the Abbotsford Police to overcome everything that's coming in here. Really? David Eby should say this is a conservative riding. It's a mess with the Conservatives in Abbotsford on everything that's taking place. And you would think your MLAs and the Conservatives would start standing up and calling out things. But it looks like Corky Neufeld needs another chair at the ledge. His butt's getting bigger because Chief Watts has got his head up it all day long. What's Chief Watts doing? Let me tell you what the city said. You know what he's doing, Mr. Pelican? He's rubbing against Corky Neufeld so these things don't get called out, and he's like, I'm your friend. You know, I bought you coffee and do that. Rather than stand up and be a politician and say, this guy has no idea. It would be better for Chief Watts to drop everything, get in a little paddle boat, a little inflatable tube, and start paddling to Victoria to save the company. She's in trouble. She's in trouble. Everybody knows that you should be up them homes taking them statements, and the more you block it, the more I'm going to rev it up from Darren Brown's information till you're dragged on the streets and you no longer serve law enforcement, threatening residents and figuring other police forces should come in and leniency when they see it was little kids and families. I wonder how that's going to work. So on Monday, I expect you to do a bigger one. So let's talk about the launch. I told you that George Ferguson would be the spirit that pushed me and would be here for me every day. I was his neighbor, and George would be here auditing your life and what took place and demanding that the federal government bring the RCMP in and demanding why Henry didn't call out David Eby. There must be somewhere they're laying in bed. Ed Fast got caught with specific P. Combs, Devon Roy into the verse, and that's why he wasn't calling the zoning change, the beat on the homeless tree, because it was going to benefit the verse, which his son-in-law is tied to with specific P. Combs, Devon Roy. Ain't it a small world? When you start to kill somebody, everything gets open. You know, I saw the other day, Peter Sparanese called me for the first time. George Ferguson would have been here, and I believe it in my heart and spirit, and that's why I fight, because I was his neighbor and I knew George was a great man. This is his road, George Ferguson Road. I believe when you travel up George Ferguson Road, it's all cut to pieces. Look at that. Let me tell you my experience from Peter Wall, Aquilini, Mike Dakota, and Ani, and all these big companies. When you're in the development business like we are and building big towers, there's a thing called the DCCs. Now the Chief Watts and his guys would have to learn what the DCCs are. The DCCs are the developer that's got to pay for it when you're going to bring services and all these things to the city and into your buildings. And them DCCs are collected to make sure when these roads get cut, they get put back exactly what they are. Exactly, put back exactly like they were, with none of these bumps, none of these cuts. By doing these fast cuts and putting this stuff in, you're collecting 90% of the DCCs in your back pocket and taking them out the door. The economic development officer was Henry's son. Remember, I told you, he showed me more than what he should have showed me. And when he learned that I was Mr. Pelican, Henry kicked him out of the city, and all of a sudden, he went to open his own company with all the information he had out of the city and clients, and called Blue Sky, and we saw it. And he owed Ross and everybody. So them DCCs is everywhere you drive through to Abbotsford, our roads are cut to pieces. As your mayor, I'm going to go after everyone that brought these sites to put them roads exactly back, exactly like they were. Nobody's going to get away. So let me tell you where them DCCs went. Remember I told you when Henry Brown was the mayor, he didn't like the cracks and the splits in the pavement on Downs? And Ed should have called him out. And he used taxpayers' money where his road was still good, and he had snow plows. Remember, he needed the plowing, and he put a bike leg in. Them DCCs went to give his road on Downs the number one thing. It looked like the King of England was coming here. And this is what they were doing with the DCCs. Now, I want to fix these roads, and I'll tell you why I want to fix them. For my taxpayers, first of all, that will be done, and I'll go after them DCCs. I told you one. First, we're going to get rid of the Abbotsford police. We're going to drive your taxes down, and we're going to go after these. Developers are going to pay. The developers that have been blocked here, the Augustine billionaire, we're going to get these people back. We're going to start something that's should have been never, ever taken away from the city. That is this transparency and openness. And you can see Peter Sparanese, the city manager, that's supposed to know this. He has an obligation when he asked to be the manager about these DCCs. That's criminal irresponsibility, because a lot of these cuts and stuff are so bad that cars are getting messed up and they're complaining on deaf ears. I knew about these DCCs and these cuts in the road, but I want to fix them. I'll tell you why. Remember the Abbotsford police when they pricked up that prostitute in the car and they had their way? If they're going down the road and they hit these big holes with that prostitute on their lap, they could launch. And we don't want to launch like they just had with the bullet wrap. That launch then would mean the chief would have to call a press conference and ask the city taxpayers to give another $2 to $4 million for contraception pills and protection, and maybe abortions because of the launch. So we want to protect the launches, and we don't want to make sure that this took place. This is why Henry Brown had to have me threatened and blocked. This has to go to the world stage. It has to have the general public. It has to have Abbotsford residents. But above all, ladies and gentlemen, you know, and I know, it has to have the best, the RCMP. So if my sources have always been right, they've never led me astray because they've been here from day one. And they're the back players that when they saw Henry doing what they were doing and they told, just as they told on Ross's jump that was a PR so I could set up months that he was practicing to do it to overcome it. It's a sissy. Mogale's wife jumped and she jumped tandem and Ross jumps tandem and you can see it. But the hypocrite tried to show he was a Canadian. And that should have never been done. Ross should have never took that stand. A Canadian would have never looked away from them families when them homes went down the mountain on Henry's scam. A Canadian would have never took his gas station with all the toxics and dumped it in the creeks so other people could be contaminated in that. A Canadian would never cheat in an election. A Canadian would never allow his team to threaten another guy and said they grabbed him on their whipper-whopper. A Canadian would stand and fight for the issues and the values and say that he's a better person and he can do better for his city. Ross couldn't do that. Ross was always Henry's lackey with Dave Lowens. And Dave Lowens is the first guy to tweet that out. And he tweeted that kabobble out. Not even Ross's wife did because she knows Ross is in over his head. Henry owned him. He sold his soul. And that was clear when Jake Siemens came to see me. These DCCs, if you drive downs, made sure that the percentage of them DCCs that are supposed to guarantee it back like it was, went to pave Henry's friends in front of Henry's house with complete, like gold. Henry thought he was gone to heaven. The lane was painted with gold. He couldn't resist it. Should have never took place. A bike lane should have went down. Them DCCs to developers go back, exactly what it is. Now, to Chief Watts, Monday morning is tomorrow morning. I expect that all your task force, your officers, the launchers that disgraced and spit on other police forces because you couldn't do it right. I wonder if Rick Rakes wrote the story how to get that bullet wrap launched by you, or maybe Henry told you with Vicky Hopes, or who wrote it, but it was a bad statement. You want me to help your police department? I'm going to show you how. You must say to the whole of Canada, we're a failure. Our police department's based on organized crime. That's proving. We allowed threats. We allowed that all, but we're greedy. We're holding on to our positions. We abused everything that's sacred. We don't serve and protect. We went out and abused, and there's too much. I'm fighting for my life. I believe the only way I can save the Abbotsford Police is now snowball everybody and get David Eby in here. David Eby should say this. This is a BC Conservative, a Conservative stronghold, and it's the Conservatives, and Corky Neufeld needs 2 chairs, and Chief Watts, it's too obvious. Your obligation, let me make it clear, your obligation is not to sit with your filthy man and listen to the stories what they can come up under that uniform. That uniform can't protect you. Not no more, because we're guessing that the officers that die in the line of duty after this heinous act, and this act was bad, it was one of the worst, that they're being purposely targeted, and that there nobody can learn to live with, because even these filthy officers have kids at home and honest wives that think, oh, my daddy died in the line of duty, my husband died in the line of duty, not knowing they were working for Henry. I made it clear, and I'll tell it again, there's not too many people that will ever get the breaks that Abbotsford homeowners and we got when Henry's son opened his mouth and I knew to go around the Abbotsford police and take evidence away from them because they were cleaning it and they thought they had it in the bag, and go to the RCMP. The Abbotsford police got this myth. We need all evidence, or we could charge you under the criminal code for holding the evidence, because that way we could clean our guys and cold our guys. This will set a new way of policing. This will make sure that police do reports, do investigations, because if not, you're going before the criminal justice system and you're going to get charged. So these men are trying to bail out. What should be done, and all the RCMP know, John Rusted know, Pierre Poilievre knew, and even Terry Beaches knew, what should have been done is Abbotsford residents, Abbotsford witnesses should have been opened to come into the police building and give their statements to the top of the Abbotsford police and go after the officers. They weren't done. You know why? Because them officers would have to incriminate themselves, arrest themselves, and go to jail. And now you could see them behaving like criminals. You could see them, they were out of control. I'm all for policing. I argue 24/7. Barry Daniels was a good police. There's some great man in the Abbotsford police. They got tremendous hearts, like Dick's. Dick's lifted Abbotsford residents up, said there was corruption in the bottom. They come after it when it's in the top. It's all fine for them because they're lavish paychecks and they didn't come out and see you residents. But Dick's belongs to this company. When you're involved in coke and there's a drug raid and you're the guy sitting on the TV watching the Tysons fight and everybody's snorting coke, you all go to jail. Abbotsford police can sit in all their meetings they want. They can pull all their PR work they want. The shit they're doing is directly about them, and they're not even taking in consideration other law enforcement. They're panicking and they're launching far too early. You can't be launching. So if you're going to launch the new police building, you're launching wrong. You got to launch like this. Eby, we're in trouble. They're going to pretty soon start tracing you because Henry hasn't called you out for the flood or the 5 leaders. The 5 leaders haven't took a picture with the Abbotsford police. The $71 million, the cost overrun on Unitech, Eby, all the stuff with Archway Community Services having its taxes waived and everything. Please, Eby, anything. I know this, and let me make it clear. How Eby's tied to Henry Brown. Henry Brown had Mike Sir do his dirty work. Bob Rich went to work for Eby. That was clear. Now Mike Sir went flying over to Surrey after he was caught and he knew he couldn't keep this down because social media, world YouTube, and police don't cover it. He fled. Henry would be on the phone asking him, please Mike, I'll do anything. It's Henry's life. Henry faces jail, and I'm adamant about the full weight of the law of what took place. I'm adamant about what took place in our city, on our residents and homeowners. These childish bats didn't want to go and play with the mob because they land up dead. So what they did, they victimized Abbotsford residents, Abbotsford taxpayers, and the homeowners to benefit off of it. The Cooper's Farm, changing the zoning, the whole bloody thing. We're going to go after that, Abbotsford. I'm going to make you one of the proudest cities in Canada. And being a conservative riding, a conservative stronghold, conservatives are all for law. And I believe that there is an easy thing. When all the conservatives came to my house and John Rustad, the Abbotsford police had no idea what was up in my house. When the task force circled me and tried to turn me into a criminal and made allegations. Let me tell you to the Abbotsford police, uniform ain't gonna save you. Upstairs ain't gonna save you. This vulnerability that we know where the gangs are on the street, I believe you do, and I believe you know where it is, so you can go get your local fix, come back and do it. This is going to be a policing like policing when residents walk in and everything. The RCMP and Pierre Poilievre said, Mr. Pelican, you're the man on YouTube with all the homeowners. I said, that's clear. And he said, the Abbotsford police watched that. And they haven't pulled up to your house and said, now we need the evidence against our officers, because you're not only making false statements or allegations. These are men that are in the community. And he said, when we saw the Abbotsford police not coming up to your house, guiltiness showed right away. We need the DCCs fixed. So when the Abbotsford police got that prostitute and they're going down the road with her on their lap, they don't launch. But Henry's Road got paved, Darren Brown showed me, out of them DCCs. That's not how the DCCs work, right, Peter Sparanese? They work when you dig, it goes back exactly like it is, and it's put back. This is why I told Peter Sparanese the other day in the phone, guard yourself, take the complaint serious, do your legwork, because you endangered the people at Mackenzie Bog. You failed to cease and desist. I'm serious. So are the people that are with me. I will push for the maximum sentence on Mackenzie Bogg, and everybody stand in the courtroom and tell their stories so Peter Speronase's asset, his house, Ross Siemens, and everybody face charges because you endangered families, you endangered old seniors, and you endangered everybody, and you laughed and giggled to benefit, and you took advantage of a city office for your gain. I'm live, George Ferguson Road. And you know why I had to do this on George Ferguson? This was shaking George Ferguson in the grave, and he was like, Mr. Pelican, please, Mr. Pelican, please, Mr. Pelican, get out there. I can't take it. That's my road. It's named after me. It's my legacy and everything. It's shaking me right to the core. Get on the DCCs. Ross, I told you not to be jumping out of that parachute. A man who has no legs to stand on shouldn't be jumping, and jumping tandem is very, 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 very weak and very bad. Live, Abbotsford, British Columbia.